Thank you, Chloe, for that Bible reading. I was a little stuck there. I tell you, masks and headset microphones are not a good combination. I spent quite a long time trying to get this off. Today is the first Sunday of the month. It's October the 4th. It is conventionally the time that we would be celebrating harvest together. And it's an all-age worship service, and usually we have a wonderful opportunity to celebrate all of God's gifts to us, to think about how he provides for our needs, to think about how we support those who don't have enough, and we often talk about the work of the Hackney Food Bank and take up an offering for them, and we're not doing that today. It's kind of sad. But today also marks the end of a season in the church's calendar, which is now known as Creation Tide, which runs throughout September until the very beginning of October, and it concludes today on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, who, if you know your Christian history well, was a famous Christian leader who had a particular concern for creation, for animals, for the welfare of the world around us. And I would love us to begin today by thinking about what are our favorite aspects or elements of the world around us. What are the things that we love most about the world that God has given us? Now, I'm not going to come round with a roving microphone, but you can, and you can't really shout out loud. But if you're online, you could write something in the comment thread, and Sarah here will get that, and she can pass that back on to me. Or you can give me a loud whisper of something in the created world that you really like, something that you appreciate. Don't be shy. Don't hold back. Let's go. Flowers, yes, I love flowers too. Anyone else? Animals. I might do a little straw poll in this in a moment. Okay, flowers and animals. What else in the created world do we really love? Birdsong. Trees, beautiful. The beach, yes. So what we've got flowers, we've got animals, we've got birdsong, we've got trees, we've got the beach. Anything else in the created world that we love? Oh, I can't hear you, Daniel. Say that again for me. Grass. I love grass. In fact, we have just recently had our back garden re-turfed, and I get to look out on luscious green grass every day and then get irritated by the squirrels who are digging to put nuts in it. Anybody else? Anything they love? Food. Yeah, beautiful food, delicious food and drink. Let's have a little straw poll. Put your hand up if you love the sun shining. Brilliant. Put your hand up if you love it when it's snowing. Put your hand up if you love waking up early in the morning and seeing the sunrise at dawn. Okay, put your hand up if you love a dramatic sunset over the sea. Good. Put your hand up if you love looking up at the stars at night. Yeah. You don't get to do that very much in London, do you? Because there's too much light pollution. But wonderful. Put your hand up if you love the rain. Oh, wonderful. So some people were so delighted to come out to church this morning because of all the wonderful rain that we've got. Isn't it great? I'm not sure how I feel about the rain. I'm a little more ambivalent. When we think about the created world, we're thinking about a whole range of different things. Animals, food, plants, trees, seasons, climate, meteorological things, all kinds of things. Last week I spoke about pursuing our purpose. And during that sermon last week, I said this. I wrote these words, and I want to read them again to you. I said, God's original purpose for us in creation was that we might be stewards of his creation, caring for the world, tending to its needs, making it fruitful. Instead, we've exploited the world for our own gain. And at no stage of human history have we done this more shamefully than the past 200 years. Environmental disaster now looms. We can't cry out to God for help if we're not willing to take responsibility, to change our ways, and to work with him for the renewal of all things. That's what I said last week, and today I want to talk a little bit more about that. About our primary purpose in life, God's primary purpose for us, to be stewards of God's creation. Here's how the author Rick Warren puts it. He says, the first job God gave humans was to manage and to take care of God's stuff on earth. This role has never been rescinded. That means cancelled. This role has never been rescinded. It is part of our purpose today. That's quite striking, isn't it? The first job that God gave to humankind was to take care of things, to tend to things. And that job has never been taken away. It's our job now. It's part of our purpose today. And so this harvest time, at the end of this season of creation tide, it's a chance for us to stop and to consider God's creation and our part in it, our relationship and our responsibility for the environment of the earth. If we've been appointed trustees of God's property and we're invited to take proper care of his creation, then we need to have a think about how we're doing and what we could do differently. So I've titled today's sermon, here's a slide for us, Becoming Better Stewards. We want to become better stewards. Now, how have we been doing? What a year it has been in Planetary news. Here is the first big news story that came out 2 weeks ago, which I think has an impact. 2 weeks ago, China pledged to become carbon neutral by 2060. This is a big deal. China is the world's biggest emitter of carbon gases, carbon offshoots. They use a huge amount of fossil fuels in production, in manufacturing, in all of the factories all over the place. And there's a huge amount of carbon gases emitted by China. And they have pledged to become carbon neutral by 2060. Now, many people might say it's not far enough, it's not soon enough, but it's the first time they've put any date on when they want to work towards carbon neutrality. So that is big news. Second big piece of news that came out 2 weeks ago is that Japan has discovered a plastic-eating enzyme. There are various kind of enzymes that can be added to cottons and things like that, and fabrics to help them be absorbed and to help them break down. But they've discovered a new enzyme that can be added to plastic that eats it and works it through 6 times faster. So that's a very exciting thing. Do I have a message from the back? No. I wasn't sure. For those who are watching and can't see this, Tash just did that. And I think she was celebrating the news. But I thought maybe my microphone wasn't on. I thought that was a big warning. But that's great. We should celebrate the news that China is going carbon neutral by 2060 and Japan have found a plastic-eating enzyme. Yes! Throw your hands up. Come on. Good. We need something to celebrate at the moment, don't we? Here's some other things that we can celebrate. This year has been an awful year because of COVID, and it's horrible, and everybody's struggling with terrible stress. But there have been some little silver linings. Let's have a look at some pictures of cities in lockdown. Here's London in lockdown. That's that's near Greenwich somewhere. Let's have a look at the next one. There is Moscow in lockdown. It's deserted. Let's have a look at another one. Mumbai, those roads would normally be teeming, covered in smog. Deserted. Let's have another one. New York, look at that. Has anyone ever seen New York streets so clear? Let's have another one. Cairo. I think that's all of them. Is that all of them? Yes, great. One of the reports that came out during lockdown was that air pollution dropped dramatically. Our climates in our cities became better. They became healthier because there was less pollution. There was less traffic. There were less exhaust fumes pumping out. The use of fossil fuel dropped dramatically. All the people who measure these things said, actually, the reduction in international travel, in aeroplanes, in cars, suddenly gave us an image of how the creation could be restored and cared for better. So there have been some brief moments of joy amidst it. But lockdown and COVID hasn't been entirely straightforward. There has been an extraordinary surge in the production of disposable plastics, single-use gowns, single-use masks, single-use gloves, all these kind of things. And that poses also some real problems, really challenging. Now, I want to do something. I've got an object lesson. I'm going to do this. I'm going to disappear from the screen for a minute, but I'll be back. Because I just thought I wanted to think a little bit about how we care for creation. I've got some objects here, and I think they're going to angle the camera down a little bit so that everybody can see, because we can't come up and interact with them. I've got a bag full of stuff here that I prepared. And what will happen in a moment is you'll be able to see close up on the screen. I'm getting some of this stuff out. And I want us to think a bit about everyday stuff, how we use it, how we play our part in caring for our world. I can't shake this bag too hard because actually I've just remembered that in here I've got some eggs. So I must not shake those too hard. So when we are thinking about the world in which we live and the context of all that, some of that good news about changes that are going on, we also need to think about not just about the big picture, what's going on in different cities and around the world, but what we do, and what we do, how we play our part. One author I was reading this week reminded me that even the greatest of lakes is made up of individual drops of water, and each of us get to contribute. So here are some everyday objects, and I thought what I might do is organize these into little categories. So there's my water bottles there, and there's my coffee cups over here. And I've got some food containers. I'll put those just there. I've got some food, I've got some eggs, and I've got some tomatoes. I'll put those just there. And look, here we are. I've got 2 face masks at the moment. Here we go. One of those. I've got some T-shirts here. These are mine. They're clean. Don't worry. They don't smell. No, they don't smell. They're fine. There's a couple of T-shirts. I'll put those just there. I've got 2 bags. There's my 2 bags. And don't forget your toothbrush. Don't forget your toothbrush. I bought my toothbrushes as well. So I have organized these possessions into their little categories. But I wonder, is that the only way that I could organize these? I wonder if I could reorganize these possessions, these everyday objects that I use, in a different way that might make me think a little bit more about my work in caring for God's creation. Think to yourself for a moment, at home, think to yourself, look at these objects, could they be organized differently? Well, I think they could. I think that one of the ways I could organize these objects would be to think about what things I can reuse that reduces waste and consumption, and which things have had a harmful impact on the planet. So this T-shirt, this is one of my running T-shirts. This is 100% polyester. It's basically an oil derivative. So the oil that we pull out of the ground gets condensed and made into fibers that then get spun. So this is basically oil that we're using up, this plastic, which is the same with this single-use plastic bag as well. So they can go over this side. Whereas this one is a fabric bag that I can take and reuse in multiple places. And this T-shirt is 100% cotton. Now, I can't vouch that it's organic cotton. There might be some issues with this, but it's certainly a little more sustainable. Here's my single-use face mask, which will just go into landfill. Here's my washable one that will go in the wash and keep on getting used. So put those that way around. Here's my coffee cups. This could go in recycling, but it's still single use. It might not get recycled effectively. It could just go into landfill. This costs quite a bit. This was a gift for me, and so I'm definitely not putting that into landfill. I'm keeping hold of that. These are both made of plastic, but one is a toughened, durable plastic, which I'm going to wash and reuse again. And some of these sorts of things, some of you will have these you've had for 30 or 40 years. Anyone got a Tupperware they've had for over 30 or 40 years? Probably. Yep. It's just our household then, just the vicarage. Whereas this could be recycled, but it very often gets thrown in the bin. My toothbrushes, look, I've just switched from these. This is a single-use disposable toothbrush. Millions of these thrown into landfill every year, and they take thousands of years to break down. This is made out of bamboo, and it's much more sustainable and degrades naturally. So I'll switch those. There's my reusable water bottle, same principle as the coffee cup. There's the single-use plastic one, made basically out of oil reserves that we're digging up from the Middle East, and all fracking in America, those sorts of things. Now, the point is not to, you've heard all of this stuff before, you know all of this stuff. This is not to have a kind of, hyper-woke moment about kind of what we do and all these things. But it's to remind ourselves that the stuff we use in everyday life, we have choices about. In fact, I forgot to do one of these. Look, here's 2 kinds of food. My eggs in here are free-range organic eggs. Many of you know I'm vegetarian, I'm not vegan. I love my eggs, I love dairy produce, but I love knowing that it's come from fairly farmed animals. These are tomatoes that I bought in Hoxton Fruit and Veg on Hoxton Street, and I don't know very much about their provenance, but the truth is that I know that tomatoes in particular tend to be grown in hothouses where they use artificial lighting and heating to ripen them, and lots of pesticides to make sure that the crops don't have a yield, and that causes chemical runoff into water because just the volume of tomatoes that we use means that they have to produce huge quantities of them. So, there's not always an easy solution to that, but it's just worth being conscious of thinking about the ways in which what you have is produced. We all have decisions to make in everyday life about what we have, about how we're going to use them. And I want to remind us of some of the basic Christian teaching that we have in the Bible about the world, about the planet, about our responsibility. And the first thing at the very beginning of the Bible, we hear that the world is good. God created the world. He made it good. He made humankind in his image and said it's very good. And then this is what it says in Genesis 1:28. This is God's charge to humanity. He says, fill the earth and be its master. Rule over the fish in the sea and over the birds in the sky. Rule over every living thing that moves on the earth. That's the International Children's Bible version. In other versions it says, rule over, make it fruitful, subdue it. In other words, the earth needs care. It needs to be tended. It needs somebody to look after it, to be its carer. A little later in the Bible, in Leviticus 25, we get some agricultural instruction as well. Leviticus 25 says, you may plant seed in your field for 6 years, you can trim your vineyards for 6 years, bring in their fruits, but during the 7th year, you've got to let the land rest. This will be a special time to honor the Lord. Now, funnily enough, people who are really clever in agricultural terms nowadays say that these old, ancient, 3,500 year old biblical instructions are really good instructions because we are eroding topsoil at a tremendous rate by over-farming the land. We're not giving enough time for the land to be rejuvenated. And funnily enough, these ancient, archaic, historic, biblical principles for farming are actually really good. Who knew? We've spent the last 150 years thinking, we'll just do it our way. We'll just do it our way. We know better than the Bible. Don't bother with the Bible's instructions. That's crazy. Do what makes the most for yourself. And now people who research agriculture and earth say, actually, if we had fallow years, if we did crop rotations and we left fields empty from time to time, they would do much better in the long run. Psalm 8 that Chloe read for us earlier on says extraordinary things. It says, what is man? What is humankind? You made humankind a little lower than the angels. That is to say, we don't live in the heavenly realms, but we are placed on earth and all things are put under our feet. Verse 6 says, you put him in charge of everything you made. You put all things under his control. And we have these three images that come through time and time again in the Bible about who God is and therefore who we should be in his image. And they're the images of gardener, shepherd, and builder. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, and she mistakes him for a gardener. Psalm 80 says that the Lord took a vine out of Egypt and planted it in Israel. John 15, Jesus says, my Father is the vine dresser. This is this image of God as a gardener, one who cultivates and tends and cares for. And if we're made in his image, that's what we should be, gardeners. I don't like gardening, but I'm trying to learn to be a better gardener. He also says that we should be under shepherds. We should work as shepherds, caring for animals, caring for the created order, tending to their needs, looking after them. And he says that we should be, that God is a builder. Hebrews says God is the architect of the city that is to come. And the story of God begins in a garden, but it ends in a city. And humans are called to be those who cultivate, who tend, who care, and who build a better world for everybody. You may not be familiar with the 5 marks of mission of the Anglican Communion, but all Anglican churches around the world have agreed these 5 marks of mission, 5 statements that talk about who we are as a church and who we believe God has called us to be. And one of them says this, that we should strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and to sustain and renew the life of the earth. It's one of those areas where, it can feel like, we're getting sucked into kind of, a liberal news agenda. Are we getting sucked into this? Is this just the kind of stuff that the Extinction Rebellion people go on and on about? But no, this is actually stuff that Christians in other parts of the world go on about, especially in parts of the developing world. Our brothers and sisters in Malawi, in Mozambique, in Angola, they know that we need to care for creation. They know that we need sustainable ways of farming. They know that climate change is ruining their capacity to have a good life. Those in the most impoverished countries of the world, Christians, brothers and sisters, part of our body in some of the most impoverished nations, know that they will be the first to suffer the ill effects of climate change as sea levels rise and water sources fail. Bishop Sarah, our bishop, said in July this year at the London Diocesan Synod, "Climate change remains the biggest existential threat we face, and we need to ensure that the economic rebuilding from this COVID crisis is environmentally friendly." It's a determination to say, as we rebuild, as we reimagine how we do life together in cities, let's make sure it's environmentally friendly. I want to show you one brief video as a break from my own voice to help us think about one feature of this, which is about how we farm around the world. It's just 2 minutes long, but do have a look at this.
They say knowledge is power. So you need to know this. One simple choice you make has the power to reduce pollution, save resources, combat world hunger, improve your health, and create a kinder world. Want to know how? Then keep watching. What contributes more to climate change than all of the world's planes, trains, and automobiles combined? Farm animals. According to the UN, raising animals for food is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And that's only the beginning. As demand for animal products has grown, animal agriculture has gobbled up more and more water, energy, crops, and land. Over recent decades, vast expanses of native habitat around the world have been cleared to grow crops to feed animals, most of them in factory farms. Animals are fed about 6 kilograms of plant protein to produce just 1 kilogram of animal protein. The numbers just don't add up. Factory farms use more food than they produce, which leaves less food for everyone else. At a time when globally, nearly 1 billion people are suffering from malnutrition, 1/3 of the world's edible cereal harvest is being fed to farm animals. That cereal would be enough to feed about 3 billion people. Everyone from leading water and climate scientists to Oxfam and World Vision, and even the United Nations agree that by eating less meat, we can reduce pollution, save resources, and combat world hunger. But it's not just others who see the benefits. Leading health experts agree that we need to reduce the amount of animal products we eat to reduce our risk of obesity, heart disease, stroke, and some types of cancer. And ultimately, the choices we make at the dinner table affect someone else as well. We're at a critical point in human history. Our choices no longer have just a local impact. Their effects are felt globally on animals, people, and the environment. By choosing to eat fewer animal products or going meat-free, you can protect the planet, your health, and save living beings, both human and animal, from suffering. The power to change the world for the better is in our own hands. Together, we can make it possible.
One of the books that I've been reading this year is a volume of essays by the author Wendell Berry, and you've heard me quote him already. This isn't the last time I'll be quoting him, I have no doubt. I'm going to read from him in a moment. One of his essays is called The Pleasures of Eating. It's very short, and I might, if I find a link to it, I'll post it so people can read it. One of the things that was very striking when I read his essay, he said the pleasures of eating. We tend to think of ourselves when we eat as consumers, but he said, why don't we imagine ourselves as being the end point in an agricultural cycle? We are actually part of the cycle of production. I won't go on to say how we might produce after our eating. But the point is, he was saying, when we eat, we want to find ourselves, we need to learn how to think of ourselves as connected to that whole cycle that has gotten us to the point of our eating. And that affects every one of us. You know that I'm a vegetarian. Our household is a vegetarian. But I'm not a strident vegetarian, so I'm not here to kind of try and persuade everybody to become vegetarians or vegans or anything. But I do unashamedly say, when we think about what we could do, eating less meat and eating less animal produce is one of the most important things we can do to make the world a better place for everybody. A way of loving our brothers and sisters in African nations, in South American nations, in Indonesian nations. we can make a difference to climate change if as populations, particularly wealthy populations, we reduce the amount of meat and animal produce that we eat. The monks on Mount Athos are not vegetarians, but the monks on Mount Athos are renowned for having an extraordinary diet and living extraordinary long lives. And an article some 14, 15 years ago researching the monks on Mount Athos, trying to find out the secret to their health and their longevity, discovered that it was based on two key principles. One is that they alternate whether they cook with oil or with water. So one day they will use some kind of oil in their cooking process. Another day they will use water, steaming, boiling, whatever it might be. But the other key principle is that they eat fish on Fridays and meat on Sundays, and they eat vegetarian diets the rest of the week. And I was persuaded at that moment that if I were not a vegetarian, that would be the pattern I would want to adopt. Fish on Fridays, meat on Sundays, vegetarian the rest of the week. And that itself would make an extraordinary difference to our climate if we could eat less. What I am doing is starting to think about how we can reduce our dependence on cheese. I eat a lot of cheese. I love cheese. But I'm trying to eat less cheese and trying to have meals without piling cheese on top of it, and trying to make sure that when we are eating cheese and dairy produce that we are buying, even if we have to pay a little bit more, eat a little bit less, make it last longer. Those are just some things that we can do. I said at the beginning that we can't cry out to God to change everything, to save us, to do everything if we're not willing to take some responsibility for ourselves. And I think there is an act of repentance for the church, for Christians, to lead on when we're thinking about climate change. And that means just thinking a bit more about the world, about the environment, about the products that we use, what we buy, what we dispose of, where it's ending up, and thinking a lot more about the cycles. I want to read another extract from Wendell Berry as a conclusion, really. It's on page 22. And I just encourage you, you might even want to close your eyes and just listen to this, because it's, in a way, he leads us in a sort of act of repentance. So this is Wendell Berry inviting us to repent and to change our lives. We have lived by the assumption that what was good for us would be good for the world. And this has been based on the even flimsier assumption that we could know with any certainty what was good even for us. We have fulfilled the danger of this by making our personal pride and greed the standard of our behavior toward the world, to the incalculable disadvantage of the world and every living thing in it. And now, perhaps very close to too late, our great error has become clear. It is not only our own creativity, our own capacity for life, that is stifled by our arrogant assumption. The creation itself is stifled. We have been wrong. We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by the contrary assumption that what is good for the world will be good for us. And that requires that we make the effort to know the world and to learn what is good for us. We must learn to cooperate in its processes and to yield to its limits. But even more important, we must learn to acknowledge that the creation is full of mystery. We will never entirely understand it. We must abandon arrogance and stand in awe. We must recover the sense of the majesty of creation and the ability to be worshipful in its presence. For I do not doubt that it is only on the condition of humility and reverence before the world that our species will be able to remain in it. And perhaps with our eyes closed, we just take a moment of quiet. To come before the God who made the world, who declared that it was good. To come before the God who made us in his image and declared that we are very good. To come before the God who commissioned and charged us with the care of creation, and to acknowledge that we have failed. And as we confess and we repent, each of us can take a moment to think about how we might change our lives. How we might love our brothers and sisters around the world by loving and caring the planet that God has entrusted to our care. And now may God, who established the dance of creation, who marveled at the lilies of the field, who transforms chaos to order, lead us to transform our lives and the church to reflect God's glory in creation. Amen. I invite you to remain in an attitude of prayer, and the Elijah Days are going to lead us in prayer.